When we think of the Chosen One, it's easy to imagine a character who has already reached their peak the moment destiny calls their name. But in reality, both in storytelling and in the deeper symbolic meaning behind it, becoming the Chosen One is only the first threshold. It is not the destination, but the starting point. The true distinction, the true transformation, lies not in being chosen, but in the long and demanding journey toward becoming the strongest possible version of that identity. The moment a character is recognized as the Chosen One merely sets the stage. What truly matters is what they do afterward, how they refine themselves, how they evolve, how they grow into someone worthy of the mantle they've been given. Because the title alone does not grant mastery, wisdom, or strength. It only grants possibility. And possibility must be shaped. It must be tested, sharpened, and forged through deliberate effort. This is why the most compelling Chosen One stories are never about the prophecy itself. They are about the transformation. They explore how an ordinary person, even one marked by destiny, becomes someone powerful enough to lead, protect, inspire, and ultimately shape the future. That ascent, that climb toward their strongest self, is where the real narrative unfolds. So the central question this video explores is straightforward but profound. What transforms a chosen individual into a force strong enough to carry the weight of their world? What takes them from being selected to becoming truly capable? What separates a person who is given potential from a person who fulfills that potential fully and without reservation? This is where the journey becomes compelling, because it is no longer about fate choosing them, it is about them choosing themselves. Their strength is not inherited, it is cultivated. Their identity is not handed to them, it is built brick by brick through hardship, discipline, self-awareness, and the willingness to evolve. In this video, we will break down how a Chosen One upgrades themselves beyond mere inheritance of destiny. First, we will examine how they learn to unify their power, identity, and purpose, moving from fragmented instinct to coherent intention. Next, we will explore the mental evolution required to shed outdated beliefs, expand psychological limits, and develop the mindset of someone truly capable of leadership and resilience. Finally, we will look at how mastery emerges when they begin to act consciously and deliberately, transforming raw strength into precise, meaningful action. These stages reveal that becoming the strongest version of the Chosen One is not about gaining new abilities. It is about refining the inner architecture that controls those abilities. The journey to their peak is not glamorous, nor is it effortless. It is uncomfortable. It is demanding. It forces them to confront parts of themselves they once avoided. But it is through that confrontation that transformation becomes possible. And in many ways, this narrative parallels our own lives. We all face moments where we feel chosen for something, whether a responsibility, a challenge, or a calling. But what determines our strength is not the calling itself. It is how we rise to meet it. Anyone can be given a title. Few become worthy of it. That worthiness is earned through the process this video will explore. So if this topic resonates with you, if the idea of transformation, self-mastery, and the evolution toward your strongest possible self inspires you, make sure to like the video, share it with others who might connect with this message, and subscribe for more analyses that explore the deeper layers behind characters, archetypes, and the psychology of growth. The emergence of the strongest version of the Chosen One does not begin with an increase in physical strength or the sudden acquisition of new abilities. Instead, it begins with something far less visible and far more foundational: the internal integration of who they are, what they can do, and why they do it. Before this stage, even the most capable chosen individuals tend to operate from a fragmented internal structure. They may possess tremendous potential, yet their power and purpose are not in harmony. Their abilities may be active, but their identity may still be uncertain. Their strength might be present, but their direction unfocused. This misalignment creates friction within them: doubt, hesitation, inconsistency, and emotional instability. These are the silent obstacles that keep the Chosen One trapped in an earlier, weaker version of themselves. To reach their strongest form, the character must learn to unite these fragmented parts of their inner world. This process is often subtle, internal, and deeply psychological. It is not about becoming stronger, but about becoming coherent. Coherence is the state in which power, identity, and purpose are no longer pulling in separate directions, but moving as a single, unified force. When a character enters this state, their power becomes something more than raw capability. It becomes precision. Their decisions become more than reactions. They become expressions of intention. Their actions carry a clarity that was missing before. This shift marks the true beginning of their ascent toward their strongest possible self. Before this integration takes place, the chosen one often experiences internal conflict. They may struggle with the weight of responsibility, question their worthiness, or feel trapped between who they were and who they are expected to become. Their power might feel overwhelming or unpredictable. They may doubt whether they are meant to carry such strength, or whether they can control it. This uncertainty creates emotional turbulence, and that turbulence affects every action they take. Even when they attempt to fight for a cause or protect someone they care about, a part of them remains unsure. This inner division is what keeps them from operating at their fullest capacity. The transformation begins when the character starts to understand their abilities on a deeper level. They no longer see their power as something external or separate from themselves. Instead, they begin to view it as an extension of their identity. This shift in perception is crucial. As long as the character feels that their abilities are something foreign, something bestowed upon them rather than something arising from within, they cannot fully control or trust those abilities. But when they start to understand the true nature of their strength, they stop being intimidated by it. They begin to accept it, study it, and eventually harmonize with it. As they understand their power, they also deepen their understanding of themselves. This part of the integration process requires introspection. The chosen one must confront the aspects of their identity that remain undefined or unresolved. They may uncover fears they have been avoiding, insecurities that linger from earlier failures, or desires that contradict their larger purpose. This self-examination is not easy. It often forces the character to face the truth about who they truly are, stripped of myths, labels, or external expectations. But through this often uncomfortable process, they begin to form a more stable, grounded sense of self. The character becomes less reactive to the world and more anchored in their own internal compass. Understanding themselves naturally leads to understanding their purpose. Purpose is the final piece of the integration, and it transforms everything. Before discovering their purpose, the chosen one's actions may be driven by instinct, obligation, or emotional impulse. But once they clarify why they fight, their movement becomes aligned with intention. Purpose gives shape to power. It gives direction to identity. It becomes the gravitational center around which all aspects of the character's life begin to orbit. A character who understands their purpose is no longer easily pulled off course by doubt or fear. They know where they are going, and that clarity strengthens them in ways sheer ability never could. As power, identity, and purpose begin to align, something profound occurs inside them. The noise that once filled their mind begins to quiet. Doubts that used to haunt their decisions start to fade. The emotional swings that once destabilized them become less frequent. Internal conflict, which once fractured their focus, dissolves. The character enters a state in which their thoughts, emotions, and actions are no longer misaligned. They begin to act with a sense of inner unity. This unity is not a temporary moment of confidence. It is a lasting transformation that reshapes how the character approaches every challenge. In this hyper-focused state, the character's power becomes intentional. They do not use strength for its own sake, nor do they act out of impulse or emotional volatility. Their actions become precise because they move with clarity. They know what matters and what does not. They know when to fight and when to wait. They know how much force to use, where to direct it, and why it is necessary. Their movements become purposeful, their decisions deliberate. This is the characteristic mark of someone who has reached an advanced level of internal integration. Their power is no longer a wild flame. It becomes a controlled source of energy that can be directed with incredible accuracy. This integration also brings emotional resilience. Instead of being overwhelmed by pressure, the character withstands it. Instead of being consumed by fear, they navigate it. Instead of being thrown off balance by unexpected setbacks, they recover quickly. Emotional stability is a natural outcome of integration because the internal world is no longer fighting against itself. The character knows who they are, what they stand for, and what they are moving toward. This internal certainty creates consistency. It makes them reliable, confident, and capable of making decisions under intense stress. One of the most important effects of this inner integration is the elimination of distraction. When power, identity, and purpose are misaligned, distraction is constant. The character may question their decisions, worry about others' expectations, or be pulled by conflicting desires. But once these three elements merge, distraction loses its power. The character's focus sharpens. They do not waste energy on doubts that do not serve them. They do not drift into indecision. They do not retreat into old patterns. Their focus becomes a weapon as sharp as their strength. The final internal obstacle to fall is hesitation. Many chosen individuals hesitate not because they lack power, but because they lack certainty. When they are unsure of their identity or their purpose, hesitation becomes a natural response. But after integration, hesitation fades. The character moves with conviction because their internal landscape is aligned. They trust themselves, they trust their power, they trust their mission. This level of certainty transforms them from a capable individual into a formidable one. The strongest version of the chosen one is not built through brute force. It is built through alignment. This internal integration sets the stage for everything that follows. It becomes the foundation for their mental evolution, their tactical decision-making, and their eventual mastery. Without this foundation, even the most powerful abilities remain unfocused, and even the brightest potential remains unfulfilled. But with this integration in place, the character becomes something greater than they were before, not because they gained new power, but because they learned to unify what they already possessed. This is the moment they transition from surviving their destiny to shaping it. Their strongest version begins here, at the intersection of understanding, acceptance, and alignment. And once this inner cohesion forms, every step they take from this point forward becomes deliberate, potent, and transformative. Mental evolution is the point in the chosen one's journey where transformation moves from the internal core into the realm of perspective, belief, and cognition. If inner integration solidifies who they are, then mental evolution defines how they interpret the world and how they navigate the complexity of their role. To become the strongest version of themselves, the character must upgrade their entire mental framework. The beliefs that once guided them are no longer sufficient. Their fears, assumptions, and emotional reflexes, shaped by earlier, weaker versions of their identity, cannot support the immense responsibility that lies ahead. To rise fully into their role, they must rewrite the architecture of their mind. This evolution rarely begins with confidence. It begins with discomfort, specifically the discomfort of recognizing that their old beliefs are holding them back. Early in their development, the chosen one often interprets the world through a narrow lens. Their perspective may be rooted in self-doubt, insecurity, or fear of failure. They may view threats as overwhelming, challenges as insurmountable, and themselves as inadequate. These beliefs might originate from past trauma, past failure, or simply from never having been pushed to operate beyond their natural limits. But now, with greater power and purpose, these outdated frameworks become liabilities. They distort judgment, amplify fear, and prevent the character from stepping into their full capability. Mental evolution requires the character to question these internalized beliefs. They must ask themselves whether the limits they perceive are truly real or merely inherited. They must pass the difference between fear and fact. This questioning does not happen in a quiet moment of self-reflection. It tends to arise through intense hardship or sudden clarity. A failure forces them to acknowledge the assumptions that led to their hesitation. A confrontation reveals the narrowness of their early worldview. A responsibility placed on their shoulders exposes how unprepared their current mindset is. Through these moments, the chosen one begins to see that the barrier ahead of them is not the world, it is their own thinking. This realization marks the beginning of a profound shift. To function at a higher level, the character must expand their mental horizon. They learn that the world is larger, more complex, and more dynamic than they once understood. Problems are no longer personal obstacles, they are systemic challenges requiring strategy and patience. Threats are no longer simply enemies to defeat, they are forces that must be understood, anticipated, and countered with discipline. Their own power is no longer a source of fear or confusion, it becomes a responsibility requiring foresight and wisdom. This broader lens allows them to see connections they once missed, to understand motivations that once seemed opaque, and to predict outcomes that once surprised them. As the character's worldview expands, they begin breaking free from old fears. Fear, in earlier phases of their journey, may have been a dominant element. Fear of not being enough, fear of failure, fear of the expectations placed upon them, or even fear of their own power. But mental evolution requires the character to confront these fears directly, not merely suppress them. They learn to interpret the sensation of fear differently. Instead of viewing fear as a signal to retreat, they begin viewing it as a signal that growth is occurring. Fear becomes information, not an obstacle. This recontextualization marks a psychological breakthrough. The character is no longer limited by fear, because they no longer treat fear as something that defines them. This evolution also requires detaching from outdated thinking. Many chosen individuals carry beliefs rooted in childhood, early failures, or past versions of themselves. These beliefs served them once, but now they constrain them. Narratives such as, "I'm not ready," "I'm not strong enough," or "I must avoid responsibility," may have been understandable before, but they now clash with the reality of their potential. The strongest version of the chosen one cannot carry these mental remnants forward. They must discard thinking patterns that reinforced smallness and replace them with frameworks that support growth. This shift is not arrogance, it is an honest evaluation of what they are capable of becoming. As these beliefs dissolve, the character begins pushing beyond their previous psychological limits. Limits that once felt rigid now feel flexible. The exhaustion that once forced them to stop now becomes a challenge to push through. Situations that once overwhelmed them now become opportunities to test their evolving resilience. The character learns that limits are not fixed barriers, but thresholds of potential that expand with effort, clarity, and discipline. This understanding becomes a cornerstone of their new mindset. They no longer ask what they cannot do, they ask what they must become to do what is necessary. This evolution naturally leads to the development of leadership mindset. Leadership in this context does not necessarily mean leading armies or commanding followers. It means thinking beyond oneself. It means making decisions based on long-term consequences rather than immediate emotions. It means considering the safety, growth, and well-being of others. It means recognizing that strength is not measured by how much one can do alone, but by how effectively one can guide and uplift others. For the chosen one, leadership begins when they stop acting solely out of instinct and begin acting from vision. They begin to understand that their role is not only to survive adversity, but to become someone capable of preventing adversity from consuming others. With this leadership mindset emerges the acceptance that greater power requires greater responsibility. This realization is not a heroic cliché, it is a psychological shift. Early in their journey, the chosen one may view power as a burden or even a curse. They may want to reject it or minimize it. But through their mental evolution, they begin to see power as a tool, and tools demand responsibility. Responsibility becomes the stabilizing force that keeps them grounded. They stop using power impulsively and begin using it intentionally. They understand that every action has consequences and every choice influences others. This responsibility does not weaken them, it strengthens them by giving their actions moral weight and strategic direction. With their evolving mindset, the character gains a new ability: staying calm in chaos. Calmness in this context is not the absence of emotion, but the ability to prevent emotion from dictating behavior. When the world around them becomes volatile, the strongest version of the chosen one remains centered because their internal environment no longer mirrors external turmoil. They understand that chaos is inevitable, but losing focus is optional. This calmness gives them an edge in battle, in decision-making, and in leadership. It allows them to observe clearly, react intelligently, and influence situations instead of being overwhelmed by them. This mental clarity becomes the backbone of their strategic decision-making. Strategy is born from perspective, and perspective is born from expanded awareness. The character begins to consider multiple outcomes before acting. They think ahead, anticipate problems, and choose actions that align with long-term goals rather than short-term emotions. Decisions that once felt impossible now feel manageable because their mindset has become sharper, more flexible, and more informed. Strategy becomes second nature because the character is no longer reacting, they are directing. And perhaps the final, most crucial result of this mental evolution is that the character never regresses into a weaker version of themselves. Regression happens when individuals cling to old beliefs, old fears, or outdated identities. But once the Chosen One rewrites their mental frameworks, regression becomes impossible because the old beliefs no longer fit the upgraded version of who they are. They have outgrown them. Their mind cannot shrink back to its earlier form because it has been expanded by insight, discipline, and experience. This irreversible evolution is what ultimately makes them strong, not simply their power, but their mind's capacity to wield that power effectively. Mental evolution transforms the character's internal landscape. It turns confusion into clarity, fear into focus, reaction into strategy, and uncertainty into purpose. Through this evolution, the Chosen One steps fully into a mindset capable of handling the weight of destiny. And once their mind evolves, every action they take becomes more precise, more powerful, and more aligned with the strongest version of themselves. Mastery is the final and most defining stage in the evolution of the Chosen One. It is the culmination of every moment of pain, struggle, introspection, and mental expansion they have undergone. But mastery is not simply about reaching a peak of power. It is about learning to use that power with precision, intention, and awareness. At this stage, the character no longer acts from fear or impulse. They no longer rely on raw strength or emotional reactions to carry them through challenges. Instead, they act with full consciousness, understanding deeply not only what they are capable of, but why they choose to act at all. Mastery is what transforms potential into impact. It is what elevates the Chosen One beyond survival and positions them as a guiding presence, a symbol others naturally look to. Before reaching mastery, the character's actions may have been effective, but they lacked consistency and deliberation. Even after integrating their identity and evolving their mind, they might still fall into moments of instinct or emotional reaction. They may act quickly, but not always wisely. They may use power forcefully, but not always efficiently. Mastery requires moving past these remnants of the earlier self. It demands a shift from doing what feels necessary in the moment to doing what is strategically aligned with long-term purpose. This shift is not easy. It requires the character to maintain awareness even in the midst of chaos, to stay grounded even when stakes are high, and to make decisions based not on emotion but on clarity. Conscious action begins with awareness. Awareness in this context means the character has full understanding of their inner state, emotions, motivations, biases, and of the external situation. They no longer rush forward without thought, nor do they freeze when uncertainty rises. Instead, they observe, analyze, and then move. This ability to create a mental pause before action is one of the strongest markers of mastery. It shows the character has gained control over their impulses and has developed the ability to choose rather than react. This choice becomes the foundation of all deliberate movement that follows. As their awareness deepens, so does their control. They are not just stronger, they understand their strength. They recognize that power is not valuable simply because it exists, but because of how it is used. They no longer measure themselves by the magnitude of their abilities, but by the precision with which they can direct them. Their strength becomes like a finely tuned instrument, rather than a blunt force. They know when to apply pressure and when to hold back. They know when to reveal their abilities and when restraint is the wiser choice. This level of control makes their actions more potent than brute force ever could. At this stage, every action becomes deliberate. The character chooses their responses based on values, purpose, and long-term outcomes. Their movements reflect intentionality rather than reflex. For example, if a threat arises, they do not simply attack. They first assess the implications. They ask themselves what outcome aligns with their values. They consider the broader context. They choose the path that aligns with who they are becoming, not merely what is easiest in the moment. This is what separates the strongest version of the Chosen One from earlier versions. They understand that every choice shapes the future. They no longer act for themselves alone, they act for something larger. This value-driven approach creates a profound internal alignment. The character's actions reflect their purpose. Their purpose shapes their strategies. Their strategies shape the outcomes they create. Because everything is integrated, from emotion to thought to action, they become impossible to derail. Internal alignment creates external effectiveness. When the Chosen One reaches this stage, their presence alone can shift the energy of a room or inspire confidence in others. People look to them because they radiate stability and foresight, qualities born not from raw talent, but from mastery over themselves. This mastery also marks the transition from reactive to proactive behavior. Earlier in their journey, the Chosen One may have spent much of their time responding to threats, crises, or demands placed upon them. They may have fought to keep up with circumstances, but once they reach mastery, they shift from being controlled by circumstances to influencing them. They begin to anticipate challenges rather than fear them. They take initiative. They seize opportunities. They shape events rather than letting events shape them. This proactive stance is one of the final hallmarks of their evolution. They no longer wait to see what happens. They create what happens. Proactivity merges with strategy, forming a powerful combination. Strategy at this stage becomes second nature. The character sees patterns where others see chaos. They understand the motivations of allies and enemies alike. They anticipate reactions before they occur. They navigate complex moral dilemmas with clarity. This strategic thinking comes from experience, perspective, and mental evolution, but it is only at the mastery stage that strategy becomes an effortless extension of their identity. They understand that being strong is not enough. They must also be wise. Strength without strategy can be reckless, but strategy without strength can be powerless. Mastery arises when both elements merge seamlessly. As mastery develops, the character also becomes emotionally composed. They no longer swing between extremes of fear, anger, or self-doubt. Their emotional responses are measured, grounded, and appropriate to the situation. This emotional control is not repression, rather it is regulation. They understand their emotions intimately and use them as guides rather than burdens. This composure allows them to remain stable under pressure, a quality that separates leaders from followers. When others panic, the Chosen One remains calm. When others freeze, they move. This reliability is what makes others trust them instinctively. It is why the strongest version of the Chosen One naturally becomes a symbol for others. Through conscious action, the character demonstrates not only strength, but integrity. They act in alignment with their morals and their mission. They refuse shortcuts that compromise their values. They make sacrifices when necessary, not out of martyrdom, but out of commitment. Their integrity becomes the foundation of their leadership. Others follow not because they must, but because they believe in the character's vision and character. Integrity at this level becomes a form of quiet influence, a presence that inspires without demanding loyalty. At the mastery stage, the Chosen One no longer seeks validation or reassurance. They have moved beyond the need to prove themselves. Their confidence is grounded in experience, clarity, and truth. This grounded confidence frees them from insecurity and ego. They do not act to be admired. They act because they understand what is right and what is necessary. This selfless orientation transforms their leadership into something deeply authentic. It is the kind of leadership that endures because it comes from a place of stability rather than personal gain. Mastery also involves accepting the consequences of power. The character understands that every action sends ripples outward. They are mindful of how their decisions shape others. This awareness prevents misuse of power and reinforces the responsibility that accompanies strength. They act not just with precision, but with conscience. This moral dimension elevates them from a powerful individual to a symbol of what strength should look like when guided by ethics. The strongest version of the Chosen One becomes a figure who inspires, not because of invincibility, but because of discipline, awareness, and control. They demonstrate that true power lies not in destroying obstacles, but in shaping outcomes thoughtfully. They show that mastery is not about accumulating abilities, but about mastering oneself, one's impulses, beliefs, emotions, and choices. It is this inner control that defines them more than any outward display of force. By the end of this stage, the chosen one becomes someone others look to, not out of fear, but out of respect. They become a symbol of what is possible when potential is fully realized. Their presence becomes a stabilizing force. Their decisions influence the future. Their leadership inspires growth in others. Mastery elevates them beyond their earlier forms because it represents the full integration of everything they have learned. They have transcended the reactive, the uncertain, and the instinctual. They have become intentional, aligned, and deliberate in every aspect of their being. This is the stage that proves the strongest version of the chosen one is not defined by the magnitude of their external power, but by the depth of their inner control. Their strength no longer lies merely in what they can do, but in how they choose to do it. And with this, they stand ready to step into the role they were always meant to fulfill. As we come to the end of this exploration, one truth becomes unmistakably clear. Becoming the strongest version of the chosen one is not about being granted extraordinary power. It is about learning to master that power, and more importantly, mastering oneself. Power alone has never been the defining marker of greatness. Many characters throughout stories and history have been given strength, opportunity, or potential, yet very few rise to a level where they can wield those gifts with clarity, wisdom, and purpose. The strongest version of the chosen one emerges not from external advantages, but from the internal work of becoming someone capable of carrying those advantages with integrity. This journey is ultimately about transformation from within. It begins with facing the discomfort that most people avoid, the pain, the doubt, the fear, and the unresolved pieces of identity that sit beneath the surface. Rather than running from these difficult experiences, the chosen one moves toward them, confronts them, and uses them as catalysts for growth. Through this confrontation, they refine their identity. Through this refinement, they clarify their purpose. And through that purpose, they learn how to direct their strength with intention rather than impulse. The same principle applies to mindset. The strongest version of the chosen one does not think the way they once did. They shed outdated beliefs, expand their mental horizon, and adopt a perspective that allows them to operate on a higher level. Their mind becomes sharper, calmer, and more strategic. They learn to stay composed in chaos, to think clearly when stakes are high, and to choose actions that align with long-term vision rather than short-term emotion. This mental evolution is what enables them to step into leadership, responsibility, and influence, not because they seek power, but because they understand what it means to use it wisely. Ultimately, the character's transformation is completed through conscious action. They stop reacting to the world and begin shaping it. They stop letting circumstances dictate their behavior and start making decisions from a place of intention and alignment. Their actions reflect their values. Their choices reflect their growth. They move with clarity, stability, and purpose, demonstrating that mastery is not an accident. It is the result of disciplined self-awareness and consistent internal alignment. This mastery turns them into more than a hero. It turns them into a symbol of what intentional transformation looks like. The message behind this entire journey is not limited to fictional narratives. Anyone can become the strongest version of themselves. It does not require a prophecy or supernatural power. It requires the courage to confront pain, the discipline to evolve your mindset, and the commitment to act with clarity and intention. Strength is not given, it is built, and the process of building it is what shapes a person into someone capable, resilient, and extraordinary. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like the video, share it with others who might connect with this message, and subscribe for more in-depth content exploring character development, transformation, and the deeper psychology behind powerful archetypes.